Some 300 years ago, the monk Kuzma Tuliski, after having glimpses of our time, left the following advice for us. It will be all very sudden, and that's why you need to leave a small sack with wheat near your door, so that you can easily grab it when you run out. The salvation will be in the mountains and the forests. Do not destroy the forests, cause they will become your saviors, as your land will be all covered with heaps of ruins. So I've made a checklist with practical preparations for the end times. And all this is based on the prophecies and not my personal reasoning, because obviously in such extreme situation there will be too many things that I won't be able to foresee, and it's much better to stick to the people who have actually had visions of what will be helpful in such situations. Of course, the conditions will be different in different countries and regions, and since most of the country-specific prophecies will come in the future episodes, here is a short overview so that you can combine it with the list of things to do. As far as America, there will be relatively little harm from enemies coming to conquer you from abroad. Mostly it will be the gangs of the local people and so-called natural disasters. I'm saying so-called because even in the end times, still many will stupidly believe that they are coming by chance or by some sort of random natural processes instead of being reflection of their own thoughts. According to one unconfirmed source of prophecies, and that is Nina, there is a possibility, and possibility only, it's a conditional prophecy, that America will be hit by an asteroid which will cause large areas of its territory to sink underwater, mostly those in the south. I believe Edgar Cayce also had some sort of map of some of these southern states sinking. But that will happen only if certain conditions are met. More about it in the episode with the Nina prophecies. If that asteroid hits, it will also cause sinking in South America. As far as the sinking of England, that is mentioned by many reliable sources. But again, it will be partial, mostly in the south, and there will be warning, it will not be sudden, and the people as such will be saved and relocated to other lands. Albania is another country in Europe of which we have prophecies for sinking, and again rescue operations with ships. And actually a couple of prophecies about Japan sinking, like entirely or completely, just a couple of small mountain ranges sticking out of the water, but again the people will be relocated. And the same unconfirmed Nina prophecies talk about the sinking of Australia. I don't know if it is conditional or complete or anything about that. As far as Africa, most of it will become so hot that it will be impossible to live there at all, which makes sense if that will be after the Great War. If Germany will be like Italy, then the equator zones will be oven. So what will happen at that time is that they will open all borders for black people unconditionally so that they can run for their life, and that will be the good start. At the end it will then lead to other problems. And in addition to that, all coastal regions without an exception will be victims of heavy flooding or total destruction. A bit more on the flooding you can find in the end of this video. So currently it seems we have a couple of years before the tribulation starts, and now is the time to complete at least the first 2 points, which are very, very important. And that is to secure, first of all, some sort of rural property to which you can escape on a short notice. Because just listen what the seers have to say about the cities. The flats in the tall buildings are in essence just coffins. People will end up rotting in there almost alive. Christopher Tulsky wrote, "There will be starvation. There will be no water or electricity. There will be nobody to bury them. Blessed will be those who manage to get some sort of cottage with land. They should dig a well and then plant a willow tree on the northern side of the well, because the willow tree has the property to draw water from the ground, and it will be possible to collect drops. It will be possible to live through those times only in such a cottage." Those who are absolutely unable to secure such a property, for example for financial reasons, may consider a heavy-duty tent, because after all, this will be a short period of maximum couple of years. This will not be a lifelong situation, and also the weather will be much warmer after the big war, so winter heating will not be a problem. If you are really poor and you will be going for the tent option, you don't have to buy it yet. All you need is to have cash surely with you, so that you can buy it together with the food supplies at the point at which the tribulation becomes imminent, and at that time you will have somewhat an advantage before the crowds, because if you listen carefully to all the episodes in this series, you will know shortly before it starts that it is imminent, because all these things like the death of the Queen of England and England slipping into disorder after that, together with what would seem like a local civil war in the Middle East. In these initial days, the entire world will not yet know that the game is on, but you will know if you listen carefully to the entire EndTimes series. And then you have a very short gap. Hopefully you will have this very short gap where you can still use money, cash, to buy tent and food supplies. After that, probably the shelves will be empty and the inflation will hit, if it has not already destroyed the fiat currencies even before. I don't really know if the big inflation will hit before or after the big war. I really don't know. Actually, this video is specifically only for those who plan not to take the mark of the beast, no matter what. Those who decide to take the mark of the beast, which will be initially in the form of new documents, which will allow them to travel everywhere and have jobs, for them these preparations will be not so useful, because this type of people will be facing completely different problems, and they will not be able to hide from those problems neither in the mountains nor in the woods. And that's why the second extremely important point is to get sure your intention not to take the mark is based on knowledge, real knowledge. Because there are, for example, some people who say, "Oh no, I will not get vaccinated no matter what, I will not get stamped," because these are nasty things from those who want to exploit us for money. Now, although it is completely true that the small pawns in the game are hired to torment us for money, still the real deep meaning of the entire game will be completely different. And if one lacks this clear understanding that he's fighting for the sovereignty of his soul, and this entire tribulation will be a war of the light against the darkness, a war of the noble people against the blood drinkers and child rapers. That's what it is all about. If this understanding is lacking, then one may fall into their ideological traps, because those traps will be very skillfully made. If one is determined not to take the mark just to remain loyal to Christ because one is Christian, or to Allah because one is Muslim, we also have a Muslim quote definitely stating that the beast will be marking his people with the mark on their foreheads. So it's the same for Christians and Muslims, that type of understanding is also absolutely fine. But if one is not very religious and one still has a doubt that this will be a game of money to enslave humanity just to milk it as slaves, as source of money, then I would advise, for example, to carefully see my entire series called The Survivors of Atlantis and Hyperborea, and all my other historic documentaries. I think they're entertaining enough, while at the same time they're meant to awaken that understanding of the other reality, of the other values of the world, which are absolutely beyond money. Because many modern people have simply not seen any other reality than the money-based and can't even conceive what could it be all about. So please do not skip this most important point in the preparation, because the most important thing of this entire grand purge of the tribulation will be the shift of consciousness, and all the other dramatic events, they will only reflect each and every person's personal purges on the way of this shift of consciousness. And if one does not see it from such a perspective, then one will see himself as a victim of all kinds of disasters, or bad luck, or just greedy people, and that is far from the truth. So the next point, now, while we're still in a relatively peaceful times, I would recommend you to start learning about edible wild plants, which will be beneficial for you on many levels, even if the tribulation doesn't happen or doesn't happen in our time. And then now is the time to study the prophecies, because when the events come, you will be able to recognize them. Because if you postpone that for the time when, like, it's obviously tribulation now, at that time you may get only fake prophecies. In the description there are links for downloading the timeline and the checklist as images, and then you can go to any search engine and type in download YouTube videos or download YouTube playlists, and once this entire series is ready, you can download it in a video format, or if you type in YouTube as MP3, you will find plenty of online free tools which allow you to download the YouTube videos as MP3, as single video or entire playlist with one click. And then for $2, for example, you can get a music player with which uses this AAA battery. Or if you have a rechargeable player like this one, you can charge it with some sort of a crank thing like this, or if you prefer something more solid like this, or if you prefer solar like this. And then you can not only listen to the series, but also to your favorite spiritual music and mantras, because that will be the main thing at that time. And then the next point in our checklist is use your last opportunity to do good karma until you still can. For example, if you have some money, now you can feed needy people. If you don't do it, your money is most likely to simply evaporate and disappear during the coming financial reset. The prophecies say that charity will not exist in the new millennium, in the new earth, because there will be no needy people. There will be nobody who needs charity. I also recommend having some clear quartz crystals, because they will be helping to keep your consciousness steady. For example, you can wear a string of clear quartz across your forehead, and that will protect and keep you balanced. Huge crystals will be protecting the space of those who do not take the mark. Now they are a little bit too expensive to purchase, but once the tribulation starts, people will be probably glad to give them for free to you, or trade them for 50 grams of rice, just because the majority, the crowds, will lose their minds and they will become like animals, only thinking about immediate survival. And the resin incense, not only you can smudge your space with it, because devilish energies will be abundant around at that time, but also the frankincense is storable forever and eatable. And the last point, which is for the times in which we are now, before it all starts, is that when you buy durable goods which don't go bad, soaps, candles, there will be no harm or loss to buy more than usual. And I think that would be wise anyway, even without the tribulation, because with the current virus nonsense, they're disrupting the production chains of so many things, factories and businesses, that such things may disappear or become very expensive anyway, even without the tribulation. Not to mention the very real danger of inflation for the same reason. So I'm not sure if it is time yet to buy actual food supplies. And that's why I have listed that under the next category, which is as soon as the tribulation becomes imminent. Now, as far as food, which will not leave you to starve during the entire 7-year tribulation, probably the best choice is rice. I'm sure there are many others which don't go bad, because white rice, not brown. The brown has oils in its content, so the white rice stays okay even without vacuum packing for 5-10 years. And when you do vacuum packing, then it will stay even longer. So if you also have a family, you can just buy an entire pallet of it. Some sort of low quality will be also okay, and cook soups with that forever. It will be more than enough for the entire tribulation. For a single person, even a couple of 100 kilos will be enough for the entire tribulation. A bit of soup every day, it is actually very healthy, and you will not lack nutrition, especially when you combine it with the wild harvested herbs and grass. You will be saved from the famine. But you should not forget to bury it in the ground. Maybe not initially, because in the ground, of course, it stands higher chances for getting moist and bad, so you will have to think of some sort of very good packing. And the thing with the famine will be that it will hit gradually. The first year it will be very dry, the second year will be like extremely dry, and the third year there will be no rain at all. After that, different problems will be there. There will be too much rain, everything will rot, the fruits will not bear, they won't ripe. So there will be all kinds of different problems. And this is what we read. People will hide their bread in the soil, in their gardens. And those with the hidden corn will be afraid to go to the mill and will start milling the flour at home. And this is why, according to Starets Antoni, first of all, there will be all kinds of technical catastrophes. This artificial life of man, which is exactly opposite to the ways of God, will start breaking down. Airplanes will start falling down. Ships will be sinking. All the artificial plants will be exploding. And all that amidst terrible natural catastrophes, which will be happening all over the world, but it will be worst in America. Hurricanes so strong that nobody has seen so far. Earthquakes, droughts changed by floods. The cities will be a disgusting scene. Even those who do not get fully demolished will not have water, electricity. There will be no food supply, like big cemeteries. It will be a rule of criminal gangs everywhere. Even daytime, it will be very unsafe to walk around in the city. And when the night comes, people will gather in big groups in the hope that they will live until the morning. But as the sun rises, it will only bring the same problem as yesterday, which is how to live through this day. Don't think, though, that the villages will be some sort of paradise, because the fields will be not giving the same yield as before. Both the people and their cattle will be perishing, and there will be inability to bury all of them, and that will cause very bad odor everywhere. And then the villagers will suffer from the onslaughts and the attacks of the gangs from the cities, which will eventually leave for the countryside. So it will be not like this every single day during the 7 years, but there will be such periods in many areas during the pre-tribulation, and there will be a lot of this during the proper Great Tribulation, especially towards its end. Don't forget that you will need to have enough seeds to try to grow anything in the countryside, and you will need medication. First of all, MMS, that will not only be the best one against all contagious diseases, but it also covers such a wide range of all kinds of ailments that it is really must have. You don't need even a proper diagnosis to use it. The cheapest way is to buy a couple of liters of sodium chloride. Maybe you get 4 or 5 for $100, something like that. And then separately from the grocery, a few kilos of citric acid as powder. Later on, when you need to use it, you can make the solution from the citric acid powder by taking the same volume of powder and water. And if your sodium chloride is 25% solution, then you need to add 1 to 1 to make MMS, means 1 drop of sodium chloride for 1 drop of solution of the citric acid. Also, you have to know what is the MMS protocol. In the older videos I have a link to that, so that you will know how to take it. And also it will not only cure you from many things, but it will also disinfect your space, the room where you live, because there are too many prophecies of terrible stink from rotting things everywhere. And you better get a couple of liters of DMSO as well. That is to be added to the MMS after the initial reaction is over, and after you have added water to it. Then you add the same number of drops of DMSO to the MMS. This type of combination, MMS plus DMSO, will cover wider range of viruses. Plus DMSO can be taken on its own as a type of panacea. Next, I recommend that you have a good supply of CBD oil, and that is not only panacea but also is quite powerful and will be your best friend when you have even severe pain. It is very useful as painkiller, and also because it is made of cannabis, that means it is a good thing. I tried it myself recently, and because it is from the drugs family, it's a medicine with intelligence behind, and it will aim directly at the root of almost all sicknesses. Its shelf life is 2 years only, but I guess it will be effective after that as well. Maybe its potency will somewhat decrease, but still, it is better to have supply of it. I'm not recommending things like the chaga mushroom, which is also panacea and very effective, because with the dry mushrooms the shelf life is really a problem, and after a couple of months they start losing potency considerably. And the last and probably the best medicine which I would advise you to prepare, that you can prepare even now, because it will stay good for 10 or more years. If it loses potency, it will be negligibly small. And that's ayahuasca, but without chacruna, so only the ayahuasca vine as you see it on the photos. That is legal in many countries and many USA states. You can purchase a couple of sacks of such a vine, And then on the internet you can easily find the instructions of how to prepare the ayahuasca tea. The way to uh, prepare the wine for boiling is the same if you add chacruna or not. And be sure to cook it over the maximum low heat possible. In that way you will get much more medicine out of the same amount of wine, and also to use distilled water. So you will have to cook it for a long time, and for short-term storage you can just use it as tea, like dark brown, but for long term you can boil it down to a very thick black liquid, or even a very soft paste. That is also okay. If you cook it to a paste, it may lose some of its potency during the cooking, so probably the best option for long-term storage is the dark, like very thick black liquid. Also, that will not go bad for 10-20 years, even without refrigeration. The way to dose it is very similar to the CBD oil. You start with the size of one capsule. You can put the paste in a, or the thick liquid in a capsule. So you start with one capsule, or just the size of one uh, rice grain, something very small. And if that does not have any effect, you double it the next day, and like this you increase until you start feeling some effect. For some people the dosage might be big, for others it could be very small. This type of ayahuasca will not have psychedelic effects in small doses, and it may have some if you take large doses, but you will not get those crystal clear visions as the ayahuasca with chacruna. But still you will get the healing effect, and the good thing is that you can take it even without being sick, just to purify your consciousness. The other advantages of ayahuasca are that it will help for absolutely everything. This thing that the intelligence involved in the medicine is even more than in the case of cannabis, so you will have really like a living guru working with it if you start taking that. And if you have no shamanic experience yourself, then do only microdosing, but still you have to program the medicine every time before you take it. Just put it in your hand and talk to it, let it know what it should do, what it should heal, and what it should do to your being. This is a must, even with microdosing. You can do the same to the CBD oil, but with ayahuasca it's a must. If you decided to store it as a tea, as thin liquid, it will tend to ferment, which shouldn't be a problem for months or maybe even for 1 or 2 years. But if it is fermented and it's older than that, or if you figure out that the fermentation is a little bit too much, then you can simply boil it lightly again on very low fire and use it again. But the problem with storing it in the form of tea is that once you open it after years and you start using it, it will tend to get mold. If that happens, you just remove the mold, boil it again, and it will be still good. And then in terms of getting prepared with medications, it won't be a bad idea to secure some of those do-it-yourself permanent fillings. It is a bit tricky, but there are instructions of how to make tooth fillings and dentistry in emergency situations, so that is possible as well. So once the tribulation and the war of the three princes and the revolutions start, you may consider moving to your rural location anytime. It will be up to you and your situation, but don't wait too much because they may put restrictions on movement on very short notice or immediate notice. So the reset of the financial system is definitely implied by a couple of prophecies, and looking at the world around is more or less imminent. But we don't know when exactly only the marked people will be able to buy and sell. At latest, that will happen somewhere in the beginning or the middle of the Great Tribulation, most likely the beginning. Before that, unmarked people might be still able to use their money for some time, we never know, but then there will be restrictions on movement. Maybe there will be a short period when they could trade food for gold or silver. We really don't know. That's why I don't advise you to convert your short-term money supply. But as far as the long-term, that will be lost surely if you leave it in some sort of fiat currency. That's why it's better to convert to gold and silver, although there isn't much hope that it will be useful in any way during the tribulation. And after everything is over and the new earth starts, then you will be able to use the gold and silver for sure, but don't think about saving for those times, because at that time there will be no poor people, so you will not be needy even if you don't have them. So basically, once you see with your own eyes that everything is coming through exactly as prophesied by all these prophecies which I have collected, at that point will be absolutely no use to think of future job or business or education of your children, because any educational benefits received in this dark system will not be of much use in the future. So don't be worried that if you don't accept the mark, your children will be disadvantaged. It will be exactly the opposite. So at some point during the tribulation, it will become clear to everybody, I guess, in the different areas. That realization will come at different point of time, is that people are really powerless and all they can do is stay in their home where God has placed them and do their spiritual practice. In the pre-tribulation, it won't be that hopeless. There will be some sort of a rest in between the different disasters. The war will be very horrible, maybe half of the humanity will die, but still it will be very, very short. So there will be some sort of rest at that time, while the Great Tribulation, then the earthquakes will be much stronger and much more frequent. Another point which you may consider, or maybe not, is to have a supply of packed water and eventually also bury it in the ground along with the food. Although Norge Henny neither Irmeyer mention anything like this, it comes very often in many Orthodox prophecies. So I don't know, is it a regional thing? Maybe not, because in the Bible we read that all the waters of the earth will be poisoned. So until drinking water is freely available, if it is not a big endeavor for you to somehow pack and hide a few 100 liters of water, it might be something worth doing, maybe, I don't know. Now, both the Catholic and Orthodox prophecies definitely warn that there will be periods which will be weeks long that one won't be able to go out of the house. One of the reasons mentioned is that sticky red rain, but there could be other periods Of course, there will be the 2 days of darkness and the 3 days of darkness, during which one won't be able to get out of the house. So we don't know at what point during the tribulation they will come. That's why at any time we should have, like, once the tribulation starts, of course, at least 2 months supply of water and food, anytime indoors. And then Jehani told us that there will be sickness, which will be terrible sickness, which will be curable only with tea made of the hawthorn leaves. And this is a very common plant. Also, it is eatable. In the past, during historic famine, villages have survived only on hawthorn. There are areas, villages named after it. It was a significant food source during difficult times in the past. So you should be all the time keeping freshly, as much as possible, dried leaves of hawthorn to use them as food and eventually as cure as well. It seems that sickness will be towards the end of the tribulation, so you should be always ready. And this advice to always dry eatable grasses and wild plants and keep them for rainy days, that idea came up in few prophecies, so we better learn how to do that. Another advice that came up in few prophecies is to keep an emergency backpack near the door, so that in case of a tsunami or earthquake or many other possibilities, that will be ready. In the prophecies, the people who will not be accepting the mark are advised to keep silence in general, at least outside of their immediate circle. They advise that if some little known person asks you what is your opinion about the marking and the government and all that, just answer with a small talk. That by itself will not help you get off the government blacklists, because they will meticulously trace completely everybody who doesn't accept their fantastic offer for marking, which will be initially a card. So just by the fact that you will not accept the card, you will be already on their close watch list. So they will know that you know that they are scams, but as long as you don't talk too much, at least initially, they will not trouble you. At least in some countries. But this advice about keeping silent is also to keep private from the people who are marked, because more and more people will decide to get marked over time, and don't forget that they will be turning into monsters and criminals few months after accepting the proper mark, which will be like red hot laser stamped on their body. So these people will eventually turn to be very dangerous, even if they are normal initially. And then at the final stages of the tribulation, or for some people in the beginning of the Great Tribulation, they may consider running to the woods for their life. The prophecies recommend not to do it alone, but in groups of 10 or 12. That seems to be optimal. Not everybody who will remain home will get injured by the crazy marked people, or marked by force by the prisoners who will be going house to house. No, those will be actually exceptions, but there is such a risk, especially in the last few months of the tribulation. So by then you will have to be advanced enough to hear the internal guidance of the Lord, who will give you signs when and where to run. If you need to, depending on what timeline we enter into, maybe it will be mild. But if you decide to run to the woods and mountains for a given period, you still have to keep in mind that towards the very end, there will be these 2 days and then 3 days of darkness, during which only those with shelter will survive. So you will need to think of some sort of proper shelter even in the wild. Within weeks or months of the 3 days of darkness, after that darkness, there will be a month or two of very low sky with toxic clouds and lots of radiation. And sometime after that, very shortly after that, will be, or around that time to be more precise, will be the descent of Christ and then the judgment. If at that time you are hiding in the woods, don't worry that everything may finish and you may not know about it, because there will be no broadcast at that time. And there is no such chance, because after the 3 days of darkness there will be 1 or 2 months of very low skies with toxic clouds and radiation. And shortly around that time Christ will be descending, and then the judgment will begin, and you will definitely know about it. Jeheni persistently recommends having blessed, pure bee wax candles for the 3 days of darkness. I guess in the Hindu paradigm, the diya, or also called the Deepak, which is the Hindu version of the blessed bee wax candles, will also work. I don't know. And they are made of pure cotton and pure ghee or vegetable oil. Well, if you find yourself in a situation without proper blessed candles, you may try making diya yourself out of almost anything cotton and pure vegetable oil. So this entire tribulation experience will be a great test, the biggest test ever, at least so far, for the soul. And the results, the outcomes of this test should be understood properly. It's not that only those who survive until the very end and inhabit the world, the earth after the judgment, they are the only ones who took the test. Not really, they are just some of those who took the test. In the Orthodox prophecies, in one of them it was actually explained that God will arrange the end, what we call death, to many saintly people before the tribulation even starts, so that because they don't need to experience it, they would have taken their test even before it starts. Because the law of karma will remain valid throughout the entire tribulation, and nobody will suffer through horrors just because of the mistakes of others, and those who don't have to pay for such things, they will be taken away by the destiny even before everything starts. While yet others, and according to the prophecies it seems most of everybody else, because we read that something like 5, 10, 15% of the population survives until the very end. So many of the saintly people will be taken by the Lord to his place during the tribulation, either by what most people call dying, or either by rapture. And many of these souls will continue to very high realms for further education and development of their soul. It doesn't mean that if they died early in the tribulation they were not good enough to stay until the end. Definitely not according to the prophecies. And as I was recording this episode, this question was submitted. He says, I'm not Christian, Muslim, and don't practice Sanatana Dharma, but I'm pagan. What do you think pagans can do to prepare? The preparations, the test, the experience will be the same for everybody. The affiliation to some religion will only change the flavor of the motivation, not even its essence, but only the flavor. Religious people will have some advantage because they will be more inclined to believe the prophecies, but not much also because their religious pastors and teachers and leaders, 99% of them or more, will try to lead them towards the Antichrist. So religious membership or affiliation will have double-sided effects. unless they are members of some really good religious groups. Like I've heard very good things about the Quakers in America. They know very well what will be coming, and for them it's essential to have everything set up in a farm without the need of any electricity. For example, they are allowed to have a pump, but only as long as they have functioning irrigation without the need of electricity as well, fully functional along the along the system which is dependent on electricity. I've heard that they have amazing hand tools which can rival the precision of all kinds of machines. They can be fully self-sufficient without any modern technology, and they know what is coming, and this type of people will have great advantage. But I think this will be a very small percentage of all religious people. Agnostic people and even some atheists have very good chances of taking the test with the highest possible mark, as long as they have very honorable nature and do not take the mark of the beast just because they understand that joining a criminal gang is unacceptable. And this internal sense of honor and true dignity, pride of their own divine nature, the strong conviction that the path of crime is just unacceptable under any circumstances, this determination alone is enough to save them. And now just a couple of orthodox quotes. If you've got a hut with some sort of patch of land, good. At least you can shelter yourself somehow. While those who have nothing, they will just die behind the fence. Times will come that you will see children playing on the streets with banknotes and even precious stones, because at that time they will lose their meaning. That's why it is better to buy land. If you are a modest person, you can survive just with small patch of land, of animals, and a small garden. And after all this will not be very long, 3 years, 3.5. Time will be running so fast by then that you will not notice how these years passed. God will not leave the man without help. Yes, this is another interesting point, which by the way comes in many prophecies, that although it's difficult to imagine, but somehow they all say that time will be running very fast towards the end. And possibly indeed our experience will be as if it wasn't a couple of years, but almost like a couple of months. It's possible. Because the very fabric of reality, what we call reality, what we perceive as reality, will be changing at that time, so such effects will not be impossible. You will be far better off if you die from hunger, but do not accept the mark. Just pray sincerely and God will help you. Sometime you may even eat dust and grass, but you will be okay. In the north, grapes will start growing in the cold to feed the believers. René from the Netherlands is asking, if a rich person buys a piece of land and builds a bunker, will it really increase his chances to make it through the events? Well, it depends if the rich person under question is determined not to accept the mark of the beast, because if he lacks that determination even now, he's very unlikely to develop it later on, so all his endeavors will be more or less in vain, no matter what he builds. As far as bunkers, I have not found any specific prophecies about bunkers, but as far as a low-profile cottage in the remote countryside, that will of course obviously increase his chances if he does not accept the mark of the beast, because those who will accept it, according to the prophecies, they stand no chance whatsoever to enter the new beautiful earth. So all such preparations might end up being useless after all. And then Renee is asking if a person has been working like crazy on personal and spiritual development for years, but has no money to move to the countryside, will that really decrease his opportunity to make it through the turbulent times? Well, first of all, it depends if he will accept the mark of the beast, because most of the people which currently, if we see them, will say they are working like crazy on personal and spiritual development. Actually, most of these people will not only gladly accept the mark, but they will be preaching it with great enthusiasm. A lot of the points of the philosophies of the Antichrist will resonate so much with them, because actually they are already preaching them in many cases. So I doubt if such people will be categorized as spiritual in the new earth, in the new environment, but currently they are categorized as definitely spiritual people. So again, first of all is, do they plan to accept the mark or not? So, and those who definitely don't want to accept it, yeah, if they don't make arrangements, I mean, it's obvious it will decrease their chances, because God helps those who help themselves. If one is really poor, one should save money for some sort of tent and buy it at the last moment when it's obvious that he will need it. Everybody should be able to afford that if he lives in a city, because the city life is also not free. So poverty is no excuse, but there are really situations like elderly, alone people in wheelchair with very little money. Only that type of people can rely solely on God. But again, he will be helping only if they pray really sincerely, and only if they are determined not to take the mark of the beast. So in both of his questions, Renee asks about the chances to make it through the events. Curiously enough, it will be exactly those people who don't give a priority to remaining alive, but are more concerned with not taking the vow of the dark side, no matter if this body remains alive or not. So it will be exactly those people who are least concerned about dying. They will have the highest chances not to die through the entire ordeal. Because those who have excessive, exaggerated, unproportionately big fear of death, that is actually a sure sign that somewhere they are not getting it right with their spiritual realizations. And the Dajjal, the Antichrist, the master teacher, the guru of all deceivers, that is his profession, to spot all possible misconceptions and play on them. So this type of people, he will manage to deceive. He will find a way. He will do it. Some other groups of people who are very likely to get deceived, even if they plan on not accepting the mark of the beast, and even if they think that they are very spiritual, these are people who drink alcohol regularly, like daily or a couple of times a week. These people are in great danger. Also people who watch more than a couple of hours per week television, not counting the nature and wildlife documentaries. Some people who are prone to depressions will be also very vulnerable. Many of them, not all, there could be other reasons, because although in the modern world it is kind of automatic to assume that one gets depressed because of external conditions, it is actually the opposite. Depression is the root from which unfortunate events manifest, but it is quite complicated anyway. Depression is a sure sign that something is not right with the internal belief system of the individual, and that could make him vulnerable to the deception of the Dajjal. Also, people who would be inclined to take any of the modern vaccinations, this type of people are almost sure to be marked by the mark of the beast. Some of the really old vaccines are not that bad. There were vaccines in the past which were really intended to cure and help people. I'm only talking about the modern vaccines. Also, all people who find the measures against the so-called corona pandemics justifiable, the government measures, all these people will be accepting the mark of the beast. Now, a couple of people sent me the question, should they move out from the areas which are supposed to sing? I personally don't know. I have not encountered any advice of this type anywhere in the prophecies I have read so far. Also, not all prophecies for sinking of various lands are sure. Some of them are conditional. And also, even if a given land sinks, still there could be some mountains or even flat regions which will not sink. In addition to that, not all sinking will be immediate. In many cases, it will be gradual. There will be warnings. Plus, sinking of a big chunk of the land still doesn't mean that all the people will surely die. Just on the contrary, here and there I saw mentions of rescue operations. I don't know if there will be such everywhere, but anything is possible. But what I know is that many years ago I had 3 visions of extreme heavy floods. And I still have no clue why exactly was I shown that, because there is a reason behind every vision. And moreover, for 2 of them, also I was let to know that this is the very same event, although there was no time or location stamp. It is possible that these were visions from the future sinking of lands, and I've got 2 clues which make me think that this is possible. First of all, that the buildings which I saw, these were high residential buildings, not extremely modern like these that are with all transparent glass and all that. The older generation block of flats, but still modern block of flats. While the people, that was somewhat puzzling to me, the people were dressed in kind of modern clothes, but yet it was kind of too much of a medieval mixture into the style. Or should I say ancient to early medieval style, something like this, like the men had this type of belts. And only now I understand the possible reason for that. And it is that in the Nina Prophecies she explained that after the Great War, the fashion will change considerably and people will start dressing in the way she also described, like medieval. She said that largely the reason for that will be the change of weather. It will become so hot that people will be forced to start wearing loose clothes. I also remember that these people I saw, they were kind of European, but all of them had serious tan. And the second clue which makes me think that this could be the visions from the upcoming floodings is that it wasn't really like shown on this picture like simply a higher water level and that floods. No, the type of flooding was... It's a bit difficult to explain, but imagine as if the crust of the earth becomes too flexible, and anything that is too heavy, like the high buildings, it kind of sinks together with a small area around it, not like the building only going in the ground, but kind of wrinkling the entire landscape around. So what I saw was like the hills, they were sticking outside the water together with the top floors of the buildings, while the down floors were submerged, and kind of the hill was a few meters in front of the balconies of the higher floors.
In one of the visions, I saw an orchard.
Apparently it was flooded very recently, because even the trees that were underwater, they were absolutely fresh. So from the direction of the growth of the trees, it was absolutely obvious that the entire earthly crust has tilted like at 45 angle, and that was causing half of the orchard to be completely submerged,
while the other half was up in the air.
It turned into a hill. And Otrok Vyacheslav described exactly that in his prophecies, that the crust will become extremely unstable and exactly this type of funny movements. But I read about his prophecies, at most 5 years ago, while the visions I had 10, 20 or 30 years ago. So they were definitely not based on the prophecies, and they could be from the end times. So what were the people doing? They had like small bundles with their possessions. Nobody had big luggage like suitcases. That was too difficult. So a very small bundle, and they all looked very, very sad, but they were not in a hurry. And they were slowly moving in a particular direction, probably mountains or something like that. They knew where they were going. It wasn't a panic running, directions. So those men who could swim, they would kind of look for a path. Mostly they were walking, stepping on whatever was destroyed below, and only sometimes swimming. And they were forming like a live line, holding each other onto the hand. So actually they were not swimming as such, with their hands in the water, but at the places where they would not find debris to step on, they would form a lifeline holding each other onto the hand, and like this, very sadly, they were proceeding in some direction, all of them in the same direction. And I myself, somehow I was feeling very involved in all that situation, but I was only watching the people as if I was 100 or 200 meters up in the air. And interestingly enough, now only, when I remember all these visions, I connected also with the vision of which was very much like the rapture, which I told you about in the video about my visions, about the end times. In that one, I was participating very, very actively, but again, I was like 100 meters up in the air, so probably by that time I will be gone from this body. I'm not sure, but that's how it looks like from the visions, but still, I was participating in everything very, very actively.